Okay, I'm going to show you how I built one of my favorite scratch builds, the Sanford Son salvage um, scratch build. Now, I've given so many presentations on scratch building. I'm going to skip over some of the construction details because it's the same thing over and over and over. I'll just gloss over the actual construction. Um, that is the finished model structure on my railroad. And one of the things I wanted to accomplish with this build was I didn't want any single wall to be flat. So I wanted it to have, which I've referred to in the past as a bump out. So it has some visual interest. You're not just dealing with flat walls. I also wanted to use a variety of materials. And like everything on the rustic buff and old Gothic, I wanted it to have this 1930s Depression area rundown look about it. One of the things you should consider when you put in a structure is don't necessarily put it on a flat. I built a foam platform for this and then put in these retaining walls, and just makes it's an interesting building on an interesting platform is how I look at it. So all my builds start with aircraft grade plywood, um, half inch roughly, or 3/8, or whatever I happen to have on board. This is the extent of my planning, and as I sketch out what I think is going to be the foundation. So that's how I started. And then I built up a double high half-inch perimeter of 1/4 inch material for the foundation. And then I veneered it with random dry stack stone from Larkspur Monster Works. So that's how we began. I did the full perimeter that way. And then I began putting up the walls one at a time. And the thing about this structure is the variety of sidings and materials. So not only are there bump outs, but there's all different kinds of windows, sidings, and roof materials. I really wanted it to be uh, visually appealing. So there's my standard construction. So you've got the Larkspur material on the front and some northeastern shingles on the top, on the reverse here. So yeah, this is just northeastern scale lumber here. And that's that standard 1/4 inch material again used for reinforcing. Now, I never built one of these stairwells that are basically outside the main structure of the building. So I thought it would be interesting to incorporate one here. It's nothing more than a series of boxes. There's a good view of it. So I just sketched it out on the side of the building, and I layered in 1/4 inch material, and then I built up the sides, and I just reinforced all the way around it. And the construction was really pretty fast. This is the rear of the building. Again, I didn't want to have just a flat rear building. I wanted a little bump out. So again, with 1/4 inch material, I doubled it up and I got a half-inch bump out here. And then I sided it with like material, this shingle material on the top and a vertical siding on the bottom. And then with scale lumber, looks like I used 1x6s here. I outlined all the corners and then the seam between the shingles and the vertical siding. That's why you don't have to be too precise in meeting too unlike sidings or the corners because it's getting trimmed out. I must say, when you do these bump outs, there's a lot of trimming to be involved. It goes pretty fast, but it consumes a lot of scale lumber. You want to use one by fours or one by sixes. You don't want to use two by anythings for doing trim. That would be unrealistic. This building, because this is very thin material, these northeastern scale sidings. I had a plywood shell, which I forgot to mention. This building uh, is constructed with a 1/8 inch plywood shell. And then the northeastern scale siding is put over top of the plywood. And then on every corner, there's 1/4 inch material for further strengthening. And there is the sided walkway or stairs, excuse me, going from the first floor to the second floor. You can see the plywood shell here. Makes for a very robust building. So you've got a lot of materials going on here. We have these shakes. We've got a horizontal siding, clapboard siding. We've got a vertical siding. We've got yet another type of horizontal siding. So I wanted it to be just really a collage of different materials, eclectic look to it. These joists are, with the exception of this end piece, are just little stub pieces that are glued in on 16-inch centers. Again, see, that's relatively sloppy there. It gets covered up with trim, so nobody sees that. Just another view. There's that plywood base. And I've mentioned this over the past couple years. I build everything on these bases because should I ever move again, my last rustic buff and old Gothic, 15 years in the making, and one afternoon, in less than 2 or 3 hours, I had all the structures out because they're all sitting on this plywood. Speaking of redundancy, this is my technique for just about everything now. A base color. I use these inexpensive craft paints. I got this idea from Jason Jensen Trains. I always use model paints up until seeing his videos. Now I just use these inexpensive craft paints. I do a base color, which comes off very strong, very bright normally. Then I scratch it with this steel scratch pen. You can also use a wire brush. Then I spray it with dull coat. Then I paint it with a light wash of white. Then I scratch it again. Then I spray it with dull coat. And then I hit it with a weathering mix from typically Hunter line. And then I usually go back with pan pastels and do a little further weathering. But that is basically the procedure right there. And it works like magic. It looks museum quality with beginner skills required. There's really nothing to it. It's all you need right there. And you get that look. A little out of focus, or it could be my eyes. But it's a nice look. And I have blue and gray on there. Gray for the top, blue for the bottom. and then the trim is just white. To make it easy, I normally pre-paint the trim and then place it on. I did this one the hard way. I painted the blue, painted the gray, then I went back and hand painted the white and weathered everything uniformly. Now you can see some of the little blue, the bright blue shining through there. But see the contrast between the simple technique. I wanted a little deck on here, and I want to show this because I wanted to show some broken boards. I wanted to have a face that would have wood all around the perimeter vertically. But I also wanted to show that there were some boards that were broken and things. But I didn't want to have the whole perimeter uh, detailed with broken boards. So I put in these balsa pieces. You'll see how it worked out. So I painted everything black. So when you look, you'll see where the wood is here. That's where the broken boards are, missing boards. And then the real boards go over, the complete boards go over the black balsa here. It's painted black so that if there's a gap between the vertical boards, you don't see balsa wood, you see black. So black can be your friend on something like this. I'll show you so here's basically the finished model. I'm going to just go through a few things here. This cellar door is typical in the Northeast, in the Pittsburgh area, New Jersey, or even New England. I just took a standard Grant line double door, made a little triangle, glued it on there, and voila, I have a basement door. These hinges are these shutters are scratch built. They're just scale lumber. These are 1x2s, and I put one on there straight, the other one's hanging. I've talked about this technique before. If you're doing something that's relatively run down, this is a nice little addition. You just take a piece of 16th inch plywood and some 1x2s. I put some nail holes on here. It makes for a nice look. Um, these signs were all made on PowerPoint. We buy junk, we sell antiques. I've used this paper in the past. It's to keep it from flying away and peeling up. I've put these boards on here because I'm looking for this thing to be relatively functional but run down. And if you look at harken back to see behind here is that balsa wood, right? And see these gaps here? If I hadn't painted that black, or if I didn't paint that black in there, you'd see the balsa wood, you'd see the flooring. So, but look how effective that comes off. So when you're looking for the dilapidated look, this should not be perfect. It should look, well, well worn. And then this gives you a good idea of the number of roofs. So I have corrugated siding, I have metal roofing, I have tar paper, I have shingles somewhere, all different materials, different colors. This ladder, this is scale lumber. It gives you access to the roof. If the place catches on fire, they can dump these water barrels down. That's the theory of that. A little platform. This is another side of the building. Gray and blue. Signs were made on PowerPoint. This is just a sign or a fence that's made out of one by, looks like I'm using 1x6s and 4x4s on the vertical posts and 2x6s for the horizontal. Fences are really easy to make, and this one's, two, see how this goes up and down. There's holes in the fence, there's a patch. There's a close-up. I don't know why that's out of focus. Hmm. But drunk, hard to believe there's a tramp falling asleep on one of my layouts. It's all scale lumber. See, there's no consistency in the staining of these deck boards. The novice or the amateur would make them all gray. What I do is take several pieces of strip wood, stain them all different colors, then I cut them and put them in place one at a time, and you get this variety. So everything about this building is variety, a variety in sidings, a variety in the staining of the wood, a variety in the roofing materials, and no wall is flat. Every wall has a bump out. It makes for a very interesting building. These water barrels are up there for visual interest. Not sure how effective they would be, but it tells a story, where you can walk out of this door onto this platform, climb this ladder, and then get to these water barrels if you have to. Oh, geez, sorry. So here is there's a pile of junk underneath this, behind this fence. You have to really look for it on the layout, but I know it's there. Forget the dog, beware of the wife. I can't tell you how happy my wife was to see that one. Little amusement. Yeah. There's a nice one in focus on the layout. There's a good shot of that boarded up window. Look how many things are going on here. And none of this is hard to do. It's just a question of patience. So these rafters are just little pieces sticking out here, just super glued on. This rafter is full length. This rafter is full length. It's sitting on 1/16 inch plywood. This trim covers up any gaps in the construction. This is on the layout. Um, we're having a sidewalk sale here. I found this on, I think, what's it called? Etsy or something like that. It's a quarter scale plastic furniture. I had to paint everything, but made for a nice scene. Um, it's a close up of the building. There's that weathering technique. Isn't that something? And it's so simple. Yeah. This is on the layout. So I put in a brick patio. This is Larkspur Monster Works used brick. Then this is one of my signature fences. There's another view of the sidewalk sale. So there's the cliche in our hobby, details make the scene. Um, that was the object here, was to show a lot of detail. The more you look, the more you see. I don't know why these are out of focus. Huh. So nice. There's a nice shot of that roof. And there's a good shot of the weathering technique and the trim. and the tramp, excuse me. And there it is on the layout again. Even the brick wall has variety, or stone wall, block wall has variety. So the novice might just go straight across. I just thought that really catches your eye to put this thing on a slope and to have this bevel here and then two different walls, rather than just have this stone wall go all the way around. I have three different materials on the wall. This is all sitting on foam. So everything about this is different, slightly different color here on purpose, like they added that on later, so it's a little more blue than this. It's a very interesting building. I get a lot of comments on it from visitors. Okay.